Welcome back, everybody. My name is Gammatrap, one word, and today it's raining outside, and I'm all bundled up in my big old blanket. I look like an old sage, gonna give some wise advice. I wanted to try something a little different this time. A lot of my tutorials are more real-time tutorials where I'm like drawing the thing, and it's a small, like how to draw wood or something, and it's, describing how to do a thing. But this one's a time lapse. I know a lot of y'all are not actually big fans of time lapses, but I'm right here, all right? I'm not just plopping you in this time lapse and saying good luck, figure out what you need to figure out. I'm right here, okay? So the reason I wanted to do this, I wanted to talk about the secret sauce. I want to talk about the juice, the magic to make a piece really pop. Now the word for it is silhouette control. Another thing to think about when you're thinking about silhouettes is value control. The main point we're gonna focus on in this piece is I wanted a figure, a character, possibly more characters. At this point, I didn't know what I was doing. You're gonna see me mess around with this piece a lot. I'm just noodling around, but the main thing I've got in my head is I wanted to focus on value control and how the character is gonna stand out from the background. That's the main point. I wanted to draw a full piece, start to finish, with just values in mind. That's usually how it is, like with all my pieces, but I wanted to take you with me on this little journey. I wanted to make a piece, do a little time lapse just so I can like narrate how this is going down right here in front of you. Now I've got the figure, and I've just got to make sure that that figure always stays separated from the background, meaning that it's either darker than the background or lighter than the background, but they should not be the same values. A good silhouette, which means like essentially like the outline, or if you cut that character out, the hole that would be left behind. A good silhouette is, as one of my rules are, never boring. You probably don't want to have a silhouette of just a line or a simple shape. You could, but having interesting silhouettes usually means you've got a mixture of soft edges, curved edges, hard edges, jagged edges, and blend edges just for kicks and gigs. And the edge of that silhouette is super important because that's what's really gonna keep things separate. The values, super important, that really goes along with it, but how you control the values on the edge of that character, that's the silhouette control we got in mind. That's what we're gonna be focusing on. I really don't know what I'm doing with this character, right? I'm just, as I said, I'm just noodling around. But I wanted to make a couple different silhouettes in this one piece. You might have seen in the picture when I first started the video, there was a big figure, a small figure, and like the moon in the background. Each of those have their own silhouette. Okay, so to explain why this thing's taking so many different forms. At first I wanted to do like a knight who was like shot a couple times with arrows or something, or injured or just tired. But then I was like, oh, how about a fire elemental with like fire and lava and stuff like that. That was in my head, for the majority of this piece. But then like at the end, right at the end, I was like, oh wait. And I was playing around with colors, and like I switched the red to like a teal, and it made this kind of ghosty sort of look to it. And then it was like, all right, well, now I have to do that. So then I turned it into like some haunting ghost king or something. I don't know. You'll see it at the end again, and you'll see like the vast difference between like what I'm working on at the time and then what it turns into, because I didn't record that final polish bit with the colors. It's honestly not really the point of the video. The main point is keeping the main figure and the background and the small figure in the foreground with the horse. I want these all to be separate. That is very important. Eventually I add the little moon thing to keep a interesting balance, because that big spot in between the two in the upper area was kind of empty, and that's kind of boring. We're always trying to fight boring. That's the whole point of good stylized stuff. And there's a million things I can talk about with this piece. There's how a piece might look one way in your head, but then by the time you're done with it, it looks completely different. I'm sure that's happened to all of us. There's trying to keep your brush as big as possible before you shrink it down and do the details. There's that one that's a big topic to talk about. But I mean, all in all, the main takeaway is how to keep the figure separate from the background. Because when I'm looking at a lot of like beginner artwork, I'll see them with really interesting figures, really interesting poses, maybe hanging on a tree or like climbing a mountain or something or whatever. And often, like if you take that image, and this is how you could test for yourself, by the way, is you take that image and you turn it black and white. Just turn all the colors off, essentially. What you'll see are just the values. It's just a black and white image, just grayscale, no colors, and you'll just see the values. If the values of the character look about the same, like the same-ish shades of gray or white or black or whatever, if the values of the character are very similar to the values of the background that you're painting, that it's touching, that's right next to, it's supposed to stand out from the background, you know? If they're too similar, that's not going to be very good for your silhouette. It's not going to be very readable. The whole point of having a really strong silhouette is for your piece to be very readable. So if a person's looking at your image or your painting or your artwork of any kind and they see it, if they spend too much time just kind of like not understanding what they're looking at, like it's cool to draw crazy stuff, absolutely, of course. But if a person's looking at your piece, and it could be like one of your OCs, which is an original character, for those who don't know what that is, it's art talk, don't mind us. If they're looking at your OCs, or if they're looking at a commission, or if they're looking at a fan art or a piece for a client, and they see it and it looks fine, but if there's just that, if they make that face like, you know, usually what that is they feel usually one of two things. Either one, that it doesn't pop out, it doesn't stand out enough. And this is a weird balance because you can make it over stand out, because then it's just essentially a cutout. You know, if you make your character stand out, but then you like blur the background completely, the only thing in focus and the only thing with reasonable values is the character, and everything behind it is just crazy, just like really washed out and blurry and stuff and hard to focus. Like that might be a little distracting. It's this weird balancing act, like I said. Or the other thing that they might be thinking of is, wow, there's a lot of different styles in this piece. It doesn't quite sync together. It doesn't quite fit together. It doesn't quite mesh. When you got an art piece, you want it to communicate. And I know that word might trigger some people who are like, oh my God, every time I watch an art tutorial, someone's like, oh man, the values have to communicate, the colors have to communicate. What does that mean? Okay, so communicate just means how well they work together. So when someone says the values need to communicate, the values have to work together. Meaning, you know, the foreground needs to stand out from the background. I hope that explained things. Because I know saying that, oh man, you make sure the values communicate, the you're like, wow, this doesn't say, like the art doesn't really say anything, you know, the art just is there. I don't see why we're communicating. If you're like that, if you just get tired of hearing that, then there you go. Hopefully that helped. If nothing else, that's what you could take away from this piece. But by now, I'm sure you can see that we've changed quite a bit about this piece of artwork going on in the background. A lot's different now. Here, you know what? Here, watch this. I'm gonna switch over to like the finished product, and you can see how how crazy different it is. And the only difference I really did was like, okay, now that it's a ghost, I guess we'll put it outside with trees, and I gotta make that bluey ghosty stuff really kind of like really bright. But the values, now that we're looking at this, the foreground person, you know, the horse and the person on top, I had to make sure those were cut out really, really strong. So the background behind them is almost completely white with a bit of that teal blue stuff. And they are mostly, there's some soft lines where there's a bit of blue on them, but then there's hard lines where it's just like black, and then immediately the background. And the middle character, the big one, this is the more subtle, not quite as harsh silhouette. So the foreground's very harsh, from like essentially like white to black, just boom, boom. You got those two choices. But the middle character, it's got a little bit of everything, but I just made sure the edges of that character were mostly dark, very dark, to stand out from the more light background. Now, there is a part of his head that kind of blends into the background, and that's what I meant by earlier when I said that blended silhouette. And of course, we got the moon, which is another kind of harsh silhouette, and that could be handled any way you really want, because the moon's really bright, so you can handle it really bright, or you can keep it soft, whichever you like. So hopefully you enjoyed this different type of tutorial where I kind of walk you through an idea, a concept, because usually with my regular tutorials, I'll like walk you through the steps of how to draw a thing or how to do it, the texture of a thing. But this one, when it comes down to like concepts, this is like the best way I know how. So sorry for it being a little late of an upload for those who are used to my particular schedule. This one came out a little later in the day because I was working on the piece. I was like, how do I describe this? And I just got stuck like drawing this thing, and it took like 2.5, 3 hours to do. As you can tell, like, it's not too polished, not too crazy, but I don't know, I like it. It's pretty nice. Anyway, leave a like if you liked it, a dislike if you dislike it, sub to see more. I do mostly like how to draw tutorials, but obviously I'll do some bigger concepts like silhouettes and contrasting values and all that fun stuff. So be on the lookout for all that good stuff. Thank you so much to my amazing patrons. I appreciate the ever-loving out of you for supporting the ever-loving out of me, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.